So that's what we're looking at here in terms of cultivating this mind of bodhicitta, chitta, the mind, bodhi, let's say, of a Buddha, the awakening mind, the mind of enlightenment. It's translated in all these different ways. Altruism is what we're talking about, genuine, unsurpassed altruism. And so how very fortunate we are to be able to gather here together to discuss, to reflect, to raise qualms, to inspire each other, and that when all the conditions have come together for us to be here is already a vast accumulation of merit in past lives that we don't even recall. Even hearing the word bodhicitta and wanting to hear the teachings is a ripening of that past merit. So even we're not even aware of that, here we are. Wow. Okay, so I'll just mention for those joining us this week that if I get your emails, and maybe you can organise that, Venerable, then I can send you the notes for this module so that you get that. Okay, so welcome everybody. So continuing on from last week, we recited just there the prayer of the four immeasurables. So I wanted to just not go in great detail about that, but it is something that we didn't get around to last time. So it's on page, in this gold book, is the short that we just recited, plus the long version. So page 111. It's in a couple of places, but it's on page 111. And this prayer of the four immeasurables, it's four different aspirations, thoughts, ways of training our mind towards this mind of enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. In some translations, it's called the four viharas, or the four divine abodes. I love that translation, divine abodes, that our minds divinely abide in these four immeasurable qualities, which are positive states of mind. The good news is that anything that's a positive state of mind only ever grows and grows because it's in sync with reality. It's in our nature, right? So it's in our nature. So these four positive states of mind, the first one, equanimity. So last week we were talking a lot about what we mean by equanimity in the Buddha's teachings. And the second one is immeasurable love. The third one is immeasurable compassion. And the fourth one is immeasurable joy. And don't we want a lot of that? It's been a while since I've watched Mission Joy. Must revisit. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu laughing their heads off at silly jokes, but also being very serious.
Giggling like schoolboys.
Giggling like schoolboys, but how delightful. How delightful. And talking about, well, we would say which one was going to get enlightened first, and if I get there first, I'll do this for you, and if I get there first, I'll do that for you. And it seems that Desmond Tutu passed only a couple of years after that. That was in 2015. Anyway, so the idea is to imbue, like infuse our mind with these immeasurable thoughts so that everything we do is on that basis. So the idea is that they are immeasurable, that we can cultivate them beyond measure, very powerful states of mind. And we're only just at the tip of the iceberg of developing those. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect of the immeasurability is for immeasurable sentient beings. May I lead all sentient beings to enlightenment. We go, for real? Can I do that? Not right now. Can't even get on with them. Truth be told, right? So we're gradually developing those minds. So in the first line, we're looking at the long one because it's got a bit of a formula to it. How wonderful it would be is if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, this even regard, even acceptance, free from hatred and attachment. So those who were here last week, we were looking at the mind of aversion that puts people in that, usually people. We seem to get on better with animals sometimes than with people. I've heard people say that, right? Maybe because we don't speak that animal language that is having a chat back to us that we don't know what they're saying, so we think it's cute. They might be saying, get out of my space, you know. I don't know. I haven't got a clue. Usually they're saying, feed me, from my experience. Anyway, free from aversion, hatred, and free from craving, desirous attachment, right? This craving mind that just wants more and more and more, which is a bit hard to avoid given we live in what's called a desire realm. This world system that we live in, this realm of our existence is called the desire realm. If we don't think we've got any desires, wait till you see the ads, you know. Closing down, sale, you know, one, it's like 2 for the price of 1, only today, never get, and then all of a sudden you want it. Do you know, one of those shops that had continuous closing down sales actually closed. I was rather distressed because it's closed. We've got all our teacups there, you know, all our nice, you know, llama cups and things like that. And it's actually closed, like usually, because it had so many closing down sales. And it's just like, it's not going to close. It did. See, my attachment to that shop is evident. Okay, so how wonderful it would be if we're all free of that, of the aversion, the attachment. Imagine how that would be for ourselves, to not have those irritations, those frustrations, those angers, those thoughts of revenge. Wouldn't there be a lot of space in our mind to not have that, oh, I've got to have chocolate, desiring it. You know, when I was at Chenrezig Institute, so Chenrezig Institute, actually they advertised this, oceans of chai. They actually advertised ocean of chai. We would do puja every morning because it was a nuns community. And anyway, that's something we do. And there'd be chai every morning, but then there'd be the regular pujas like we have here. And I heard some students say, I only come for the chai. It's just like, whatever it takes. If it takes chai to get you to sit here for 2 hours, okay, chai's on. Sorry, chai's not on today. So if you're just craving chai right now, sorry.
Little banks here.
Little banks here, okay. Not that we've got shares, but we may have. Okay, so this is a wishing, may they be free of, you know, hatred, attachment, the mind of aversion, the mind of desire. Your mind would be in peace. So we're saying, may all beings have that. So this is sort of like a wishing, may they abide in equanimity becomes a bit stronger, like may all beings abide in equanimity. And then next one is taking the responsibility. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to be harmonious in my speech so that counteracting the divisive speech, you know, ways in which we can bring people together in harmony, inclusion, that sort of thing. And then we think, well, I can do it to a limited extent. So then on a good day, please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. So we're asking the Buddha, our teachers inseparable from the Buddha, to guide us how to cultivate this mind of equanimity. So that same formula is used throughout. Then the next one, how wonderful it would be if all beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. So this is where we start to look at the Four Noble Truths. So happiness in the Buddha's teaching is genuine, lasting happiness, not what do you do when the chocolate runs out, which is a book by Lama Yeshe. I always think people misheard the title. They heard chocolate, so everyone read the book. And the other thing, the book was chocolate covered. So it sort of reminded you of chocolate. Do we still have some in the library bookshop? It's now a white chocolate cover. Okay. There's every coloured chocolate, I'm sure. Yeah. So how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness, genuine happiness, lasting happiness, which we only get by, purifying all those disturbing states of mind, the aversion, the attachment, total confusion, and all the other negative states of mind, jealousy, pride, all of these things that come along on top. Just being free of that, such a relief to the mind, such a relief to the mind. I think this is the attraction of meditation, that people, at least for that time, my mind's in a positive space. It may not be throughout a whole meditation, but for some of it, it's a respite from our own craziness that, one woman who came along to meditation for the first time in Sydney one time said, I never knew I had so many thoughts, blah, 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 blah. As soon as she sat to meditate, it was blah. Actually, she was lying down to meditate because I invited people to lie down and relax and settle into the groove. I mean, the Buddha said in sitting and lying and standing and walking, so everything we do, meditation's in everything we do. Formal meditation, but then in between, it's like leading our life as a whole meditation. Wonderful. So that leads us to happiness, this, as it says in the Four Noble Truths, the truth of cessation of all that rattiness of the mind, all the toxic emotions and so forth. And the causes of happiness, that we develop the causes. In other words, we follow the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's whole life was a teaching, how you get from A to B to C to D to E to up to enlightenment, from where we are at now up to enlightenment. And, recently, last week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was giving teachings. And, we regard His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a Buddha of compassion. Like, if you want to know what a Buddha would be like in the world today, it's a good example. It's not the only Buddha in the world, but as a Buddha in the world, advocating for world peace, interfaith dialogue, harmony, and then giving a lot of teachings, So His Holiness said, well, here we are looking at Bodhichitta. Some years ago, His Holiness said, I've got to do a lot of work on cultivating bodhicitta in my mind. We're talking about the Dalai, right? Just seems to manifest bodhicitta, this sense of universal responsibility for all beings. Very courageous mind. And so he gave the indication that, so we say the entrance to the Mahayana path of accumulation, so Mahayana great scope path of accumulation, is uncontrived bodhicitta, where it just is spontaneous. You don't have to think about it. That it just, like I always think of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, just oozing bodhicitta. Can I help? Can I help? Can I help? That's the job of a great bodhisattva, a being that's totally oriented towards the well-being of others. So last week, His Holiness said, I have entered the path of accumulation. Okay. And then he said, and my intention is to become enlightened in this. So one could assume, I mean, of course, we already see His Holiness as enlightened, but it's, unless we're a Buddha, we don't know what another Buddha, we don't recognize another Buddha because we're not there yet ourselves. So we can't chat at Buddha level, which probably no chatting at all. It's probably like, just sitting there in great bliss but benefiting others. I would say you become a Buddha and then your job starts, It's a long way to get there. But then my job description is to free all sentient beings from suffering. Okay. So the causes of happiness is following that, following as, His Holiness now in the latter part of his life, giving indications of developing, progressing on the path. And it's exactly what Shakyamuni Buddha showed in his life, exactly what Lama Tsongkhapa laid out in unpacking in great detail the Lam Rim, the graduated path to enlightenment, the lamp on the path to enlightenment of Lama Atisha. So we've got all these steps that how to do it. And that's the causes of happiness. And then it says, I myself will cause them to have the causes of happiness. So you might say, well, I'm not exactly a teacher, so I can't sort of show, but as a student, because basically that's what we all are here, we're a student of the Lam Rim of the graduated path to enlightenment. So we're looking at, well, how do I progress on that path? And then if I can progress on that path, how can I make it possible for others, right? And it might be providing Dharma books, it might be, volunteering at the centre to help the centre be open, to help the centre be able to provide. So there's many different ways that we can be of benefit. And then, of course, please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. In other words, keep teaching, showing me the teachings, unpacking the teachings, see how it's relevant to my life. 21st century Australia is not 2,600 years ago in India, and yet the Buddha's understanding of the mind, the psychology of the mind, the psychologists and the mind scientists are just catching up with, right? Because our psychology hasn't really changed in the meantime. Our emotional makeup, as His Holiness says, physically, as humans, physically, mentally, emotionally, we're all the same. All the same. You don't have to believe in religion. You don't have to believe, follow any spiritual tradition to know that physically, mentally, emotionally, as human beings, we're all the same. And everything else is secondary. Difference of race or political beliefs or socioeconomic status. I mean, they're important. Those things are important. But in terms of our connecting with each other on a heart level, we're all the same. We get it. We get it. We get each other. And then the third one, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and its causes. So this is immeasurable compassion, the immeasurable compassion that can't bear to see other beings suffering. So this is really where we're looking at here, of cultivating that mind of compassion. So we have different levels of compassion. We have compassion, my family, my relatives, I really don't like to see them suffering. Or my pet dog, cat, pet snake. I heard that people in, was it Palisades? Is that in Florida? Anyway, they had, a lot of people had pet snakes, and then they got sick of looking after their pet snakes, so their compassion was rather limited. And they released them into this park. And then the government had to deal with all these snakes in the park. And it's not Australia where we're used to snakes, we're talking the US. Anyway, that was limited. So there's many ways in which our compassion is limited. I have compassion for my friends, for my family, for Australians, for West Australians. I'm working on that one. I've only been here a couple of years. Joking. Just joking. My people, our people, etc. And maybe for some other species. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, one teaching in Sydney, there was, His Holiness was talking about where compassion kicks in. And I was thinking about this morning, because he said, in terms of evolution of species, he said, single-celled amoeba, I'm not sure And then I thought, I don't even know how single-celled amoeba procreates. I mean, somehow they must divide up, like cells in our body. They divide. You could see there's the cells in my body, compassionate. I hope so. Done a lot of Om Mani Padme Hungs. Anyway, it's true. They vibrate. You can think your cells in your body vibrate with the mantras and the practice, and it's a way of cultivating compassion. Anyway, then he said, mosquitoes, definitely not. He's holding such a thing about mosquitoes. I think because being in India, where mosquito-borne diseases are rather rife, yeah, don't think so. Yes, even.
Maybe they're more advanced because you're not doing the exchanging self for others.
They do that literally.
There.
I love it. Already exchanging self for others. That's how they survive. That's a way of thinking about it, and I like it. Yeah. Very good. So maybe they're there. Yeah. Now I'll be doing exchanging self with others and blah, blah. Yeah. But then His Holiness said mammals definitely have compassion. And we see that we have biological compassion, yes, for our own species, even not related. We see that as soon as there's a crisis, and there is crisis compassion, where it's a limited time, where we have compassion for the people in war zones, we have compassion for the people in the bushfires, especially down south, southwest, Western Australia. I've got a connection down there. So, are my people okay? Whatever. So we have that biological compassion, but then beyond that, we see within different mammals, caring for others of different species, raising, cats raising dogs, dogs raising cats, and whatever. I used to get all those cute little videos. Haven't had them recently, of different animals looking after each other. So it's a good thing to contemplate that it's not unique to us as human beings, although as human beings, we can develop that immeasurably, because as Charles Darwin said, we're hardwired for compassion. So I mention always Charles Darwin because it's coming from a scientific observation, right? That we're, and if we look at society, we talk about the helping professions, the service professions, which I think are most of our engagements in the world, at least with other human beings caring, and quite a few for animals as well. So here, may they be free from suffering. And we look at all levels of suffering here. So when we talk about here, the first noble truth, it says to identify what suffering is, as if we need to identify. We all know when we're suffering at one level, but what the most subtle level is that just having a body such as this, or wherever we're born, in whatever realm of existence, is in the nature of suffering. The physical body itself is in the nature of suffering. We haven't even talked about the mind yet, but the body itself. So rather than get surprised when we get some diagnosis, or our friends or family or anyone else does, it's just that's the nature of things, including for someone like the Dalai Lama. Remember one time he was in Sydney and he had a bad cold. He went to US to get treatment for cancer. His gallbladder out. I mean, he's got a body just like everybody else. You can't avoid it, right? What we do mentally with those situations is something completely different, because the mind isn't physical. So we could say, okay, I do have this mind where, just check up for ourselves. How much does negativity arise in the mind? Self-criticism, self-judgment, anger, and so forth. I don't have to invite it there. It just seems to pop up out of nowhere. Of course, as the Buddha said, not out of nowhere. it comes from a previous moment of that negative mind, which we didn't notice, but now it's got to Mount Vesuvius. Now we notice. But before. And we've practiced that in past lives. All based on this innate mind of grasping at this permanent me that I tell all elaborate stories about me, and then I want to protect me, etc. Right? Self-cherishing mind, which is the opposite mind to the mind of bodhicitta. Totally opposite mind to one of compassion, on the basis of which compassion isn't bodhicitta, but on the basis of compassion, we develop great compassion. In other words, we go beyond just my family, my race, all humans, whatever. We gradually extend that out to all sentient beings, but gradually, because we've got to develop that genuine heart of compassion, not, well, I guess we do say fake it till you make it, but we do it on the basis of real sentient beings. Otherwise, oh, I love everybody and I have compassion for everybody, and it's some sort of fuzzy thing. But actually, we have to make it real. The next door neighbor I'm having a fence dispute with. Well, everyone but them, etc. So we have to work with our mind on that. So suffering, to be free of that, and in other words, being free of having an existence of suffering. In other words, we call about an existence of suffering samsara, which is based on our contaminated aggregates, we say, the body that we have, which is caused by our karma, and the mind states that we have, caused by our deluded states of mind, our affliction. So we talk about the causes being these two things, our karma. So we'd say our karma that ripened at the time of death into this life. I think we did pretty well. All of us here did quite well. Look at us. We've got a pretty good, precious human rebirth, right? And then you look at all the conditions that we have and so forth. We have the choice to hear the Dharma teachings. We have the desire, the craving to. We come. We want to work on our mind. This is all incredible, as I was saying at the beginning, accumulation of merit, of positive karma from past lives. And here we are wanting to build on that more and more. We probably made those stainless prayers in past lives. And in fact, it is said that we have to meet with the Dharma again, meet with the Mahayana Dharma, meet with the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa, the most profound view of emptiness, and so forth. And here we are. So these are the causes that to be separated from the opposite of that. So may I cause others also to be free of suffering and its causes. So there's a lot we can do, I think, in this very lifetime. There's a lot of challenges. I met one woman, I was in Coolangatta. I can't remember what I was doing there, but I just come out of a shop and I think this woman, oh no, she didn't follow me. Someone talked to me in the shop. You're sort of a walking advertisement when you look like this. So I allow time on my shopping experience to be able to have those wonderful engagements with people. Anyway, this woman was outside and she was picking up cigarette butts. You know how it is. So, and I think she approached me and started, basically what she was talking about was her whole life was one of suffering. She didn't say suffering, but everything was negative. And so I'd have a conversation with her and I kept going and trying to find some source of hope or positivity within her. I did not find one. Her mind was totally made up that everything is suffering. That was so sad. So sad. Because usually people find some glimmer of hope there. So she was beyond, or at that point in time, hope at another time she'd find some glimmers of hope. And, you know, any matter of talking about the services she could access and so forth and so forth. Nothing. It was all bleak. So we could ourselves fall into those spaces very easily. This morning I was reading about a woman who had been, I think, sexually abused. Anyway, and there was a terrible court case and blah, blah, where that went on. And she said, in all, you know, in the upshot of all of that, she just pushed all those feelings down until she got to a point where she said, everyone around me knew, but I had to recognize that I was deeply depressed, and then I could do something about it. Because it was a song. I wouldn't know the song, but yeah, it was a song. And so this song got her dancing and moving around, and that glimmer of hope of, oh yeah, this is the old me, dancing, enjoying, and da da da. So that's her go-to song for depression. It's wonderful. You know, we meet with some environmental causes to be able to, and you might say it also needed that period of time or whatever. No, she was talking about grief, wasn't she? That grief doesn't go away. You have to deal with it. Grief and depression. Yeah. So we've all got many manifest ways of suffering. And the thing is, as a human being, why I can be the cause of others being relieved of the suffering is I get it. I get that suffering, right? I might not have had exactly the same situations, but I understand what grief is. I understand what depression is, anxiety, fear, all these things, because it's human. We know those, but we also know, most of us, maybe the woman in Kurong Gully, not, that is possible to be free of those, because there's periods in our life where we didn't suffer, and hopefully most of the periods where we didn't suffer from grief, depression, anxiety, and so forth, right? So we know it's possible to be free. It's, you know, you just look at an animal who's sick, like I used to have a dog, and so when a dog is sick, they don't know it's ever going to end, do they? They're just sort of like really mopey. And then it ends and they're really happy again. But they can't really, at that point, access the fact that, don't worry, you'll be happy later. Or, you know, you're physically ill, your mind doesn't have to go down with it. So we know all that. So we're in the best situation to be able to help others be free of suffering. And of course, please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this, to, you know, even to have those situations arise where I can connect with others, where I can help others out. And they do arise all the time, isn't it? So this is cultivating the mind of compassion. So we talked about developing compassion that is immeasurable. This is what this is about, immeasurable towards immeasurable beings. And to His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, this is what's needed most in the world today. Compassion, compassion, compassion. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, live with compassion, die with compassion, meditate with compassion. When problems come, address them with compassion, work with compassion. Breathe with compassion. So even, yeah. So my intention is to get on to the actual methods, but I'll just finish off on this one. Compassion. And then immeasurable joy. The last one is immeasurable joy. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never separated from the happiness of higher rebirth and liberation. So higher rebirth is such as what we have. Not only a human rebirth, which is called a higher rebirth, because we can work with our mind and we have it limitless intelligence. The only thing that stops our intelligence is ourselves not believing, how intelligent we are. But if we look around the world and just, you know, the inventions of the 20th century and the 21st century so far up to now, it seems we're unstoppable in terms of our creativity and intelligence. What it says is, all sentient beings were never separated from the happiness of higher rebirth, of being born human, or we say in the God realms. But you've got to be careful in the God realms, because in the God realms, everything's a bit too cruisy and nice. It's not entirely nice. They are the jealous gods, and yeah, the upper gods war with the lower gods, because it's like the lower gods, the tree roots, the fruit tree roots are in their realm, but the fruit is ripening up in the upper god realm, so they're jealous of them. They've got all the fruit. It's our tree, you know, we know the scenario. But also, it's said that the cause of being born in those upper realms is, you know, sort of meditative states that are quite blissful. So you're abiding in these blissful meditative states, except for the arrows going up and down when they're fighting with each other. You've got all the comforts. Everything is cared for. I just think about it in terms of the, I always forget, where is it now? The cushy places of Perth. The Sheraton Hotel.
Other posh suburbs.
Posh suburb. Claremont. Anyway, of course we know, and if we know people who live there, we know it's not cruisy, but that sense where it is all cruisy, that you're getting everything and blah, blah, blah. Because it's not all cruisy. Because, what's his name? Ian Parmentier, the chef. Parmentier, who just passed away. And he said he quite liked it when he was in Belgium. He didn't know a word of what people were saying, but he got on with cooking. And then he said, then I was sent to a private school in the UK, which you think is creme de la creme, but he didn't. Thank God. So I think it's God will. Anyway, these are the higher rebirths. So best to be born human, believe it or not, with all our failings and so forth. So you're asking for that, or liberation from, you know, having the third noble truth, the truth of cessation, having that mind free of all the afflictive states, which we mentioned earlier. And so if you're in that state, so there was, His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent this one great yogi. Oh, no, he didn't send him. He was advising this great yogi meditator. He was invited to the US to a conference to talk. And His Holiness said, if they ask you about your experience, you have to tell them. Because normally these great lamas, yogis, they don't say, oh, by the way, I've realized emptiness, by the way, like His Holiness said, I've achieved the path of accumulation. He's saying that as an inspiration for us. He's only said it now at this point in time. Anyway, so he said to this great yogi, when you go there, you have to, if they ask you, tell them. And they did ask. And being incredibly humble, he put his head way down like this. He said, I abide in immutable great bliss. Doesn't that sound delightful? I abide in immutable great bliss. Hey, immutable great bliss, I'll have you in. So immutable, like it's irreversible, it's unchangeable, it's lasting. So that's his whole experience. And so this is what it is saying, you know, may you abide in that state. May all beings abide in that state. And may they never be separated from high rebirth and the state of liberation where you're free of all these and you abide in immutable great bliss. I myself will cause them never to be separated from these. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do this. And then as Geshe Zopa said, then you're placing all beings, visualize that you're placing all beings in the state of immeasurable joy, and not just liberation, the joy of enlightenment, of becoming a Buddha, and they totally blissed out, and you're blissed out because they've achieved that and they're blissed out. So a lot of bliss all around. Okay, so that's a sort of brief introduction to the 4 immeasurable thoughts, which we recite, but it's good to recite and pause and reflect on. So we have practices in relation to that. You know, with the one on equanimity, I like to call to mind things that have come up in the news, which are opposite to the mind of equanimity, you know, where there's hatred, where there's war, where we've got a lot of examples. And to be able to say, may all those beings, real beings in the world, and using those examples, may they abide in this state of equanimity, of just like a Buddha, even regard for all beings, because on the basis, none of us want to suffer and we all want to be happy. And then ask, you know, may they abide in happiness and have the causes of happiness. This is where Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, you visualize yourself giving them everything they desire and need. So one of my friends said, but I'm worried about what they desire. I mean, we look at our lamas, I look at like Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, cook up a storm for students. I was not one of the students who they cooked up a storm for. Didn't have that karma. But, you know, feed people is a way of attracting them, isn't it? You would know. It's a great offering. It's a great offering. So, you know, okay, we all desire to stay alive. But also, you know, sort of using those skillful means. And then on top of that, the Dharma comes along. So Lama Zopa says, or actually Geshe Doga said this, transform yourself into that Dharma jewel, be the Dharma jewel in their life. It doesn't mean you have to sort of try and convert them to Buddhism or anything, but by the way that you live your life is being that Dharma jewel and providing them with those opportunities. It's a jewel, a precious jewel, just like Chen Besik at the front. And then from that, giving others, visualizing that we can, because we can't, but everything they desire and need. And then we think, well, what they need is the Dharma. You know, that's what's going to be of benefit. What they need is maybe for me just to listen to them, to make them a cup of tea. It's a very wonderful offering, just mentioned. Not right now, thanks. And the suffering, this is where we haven't got to this yet, but we visualize that if we could, we would take on all the suffering of all sentient beings, like, you know, as we say, a mother does for her only child, that she would happily put herself in their situation and take on their suffering if they could. But to be able to visualize that we could take on the suffering, and then going back to the happiness one, the immeasurable love of giving them everything, or that what we have, our health, our understanding of the Dharma, immeasurable love, and so forth, just visualizing we're giving to them. This is a practice that we'll look at next week. And yeah, the one with joy, I mentioned how we can, one way we can visualize that. So in itself, this is a very, very, very profound practice. Alan Wallace has a book, I think it's called The Boundless Heart, about the practice of the 4 immeasurables. And what was interesting when we one retreat with him, and he was explaining, we were doing shamatha, calm abiding retreat. And this is in the book Attention Revolution. But it's interspersed with the 4 immeasurables, because he said, if you're focusing your mind on, on your breath or a Buddha image or so forth, and that's your whole practice, the mind can get very tight. So for the heart, we need these practices of the four immeasurables: soften our heart, open our heart. So it's like intersperse that. That was like around about a 7-day retreat. And so these are interspersed within that to balance it out, to balance our mind. And so interestingly, meditating on compassion. So we meditate on so when I was in Sydney, our very first conference at the centre, Vajrayana Institute put on Mind and Its Potential. At that very first conference, Geshe Dawa, who was our first Tibetan Lama at Vajrayana Institute, he's since passed. They had this panel of these, sort of mind science people, and he was in the audience, and he said, it's all very well that you lot are putting electrodes on the brain to measure brain waves to see the impact of meditation, that they should be putting here at the heart chakra. It hadn't ever happened at that point. It has subsequently. So, of course, through the studies that they did by putting on the head, measuring brain waves, of course, they saw the differences in people meditating. I think one time, actually, I would have to check up what he was meditating on. Venerable Thubten Chökyi, he was one of the famous, I guess, subjects. He's written a lot about meditation. He's had a lot of meditation practice. Anyway, they said that the happiness centers of the brain lighted up. It sort of went off the scale. What's the documentary? I forget which one. Maybe it's called Happiness. I remember I used to show that film a lot. I have to look back. But anyway, so they deduced he was the happiest man in the world. There was one thing that made him unhappy, was being called the happiest man in the world. It was a good weekend one time, had a spread. I don't know if that still exists. Newspapers don't still exist. Anyway, it used to be on the weekend paper. Maybe not in WA, was it? Anyway, Sydney, Melbourne. So it had him on the cover with the electrodes on and happiest man in the world, blah, blah. And so he didn't like being called, so just be careful. He didn't like being called the happiest man in the world. However, when they did start putting the electrodes here, and they found that there was a response at the heart chakra. So this was meditating on compassion, a response here before our brain response, the energy here. Also, that by meditating on compassion, within 2 weeks, just doing 10 minutes a day, it profoundly also changes the brain, synapses. So it's a profound effect. Of course, whatever happens physically in our body is not going to help us when we die. It's what we take on our mind. But the fact that scientists can measure it, that now they're catching up the Buddha, what the Buddha has taught. Okay. Right. So it was all an intro to what I was intending to do today. So here, in terms of cultivating bodhicitta, generating that state of mind, there are 2 main meditation practices, classic meditation practices. So the first one, which is attributed to Arya Asanga, is called the 6 causes and 1 result, or the 7 cause and result meditation. So it's like, it tells you, it leads you through step by step. Meditate on this, then meditate on that, then meditate on that, then meditate on that, until the last one's Bodhichitta. So this 6 cause and result. So we know a little bit about Arya Asanga, you know, who, the famous story of him. So we're talking 3rd, 4th century. His half-brother was Vasubandhu, who wrote the Abhidhamma Kosha, Treasury of Knowledge. And so they were both, anyway, so he was Chittamatra, Yogacara, Chittamatra, mind-only school. And so originally, and then, yeah, progressed on from there. But this story about him, you know, he's meditating in the cave to have a direct actual perception, interaction with Maitreya Buddha, coming Buddha of loving kindness. And the story goes on, you know, he meditated like that for 12 years, and every 3 years he comes out disappointed that he hasn't seen Maitreya yet, and then he sees, oh, well, that bird's wing that has worn down the rock over years and years and years, the bird has persisted, so I'll persist and go back in. And then he comes out another time, and there's a guy making nails, you know, whittling down metal to make nails, and takes a long time. So he thought, well, he's putting in the effort, I'll go back and put in some more effort. And then another time where it's the rain doing a groove in the cave, goes back in. And then the last time he goes, it's 12 years now, I haven't seen Maitreya, forget it, I'm going to here. And as he's coming down from the cave, he sees this mangy dog who's riddled with maggots. And he has great compassion for the dog suffering. You know, this poor dog suffering, I'll get the maggots out. And then, but then he realizes that, anyway, so he sort of thinks, oh, well, if I cut a bit of my leg and offer the flesh to the maggots, then they'll leave the dog alone. But then he thinks, well, I've got to save the maggots as well. I'll probably kill them if I just sort of plop them over there. So he reaches out with his tongue to very gently remove the maggots from the dog's body. And his tongue keeps going, and it doesn't seem to make contact with the maggots. So he opens his eyes to see what's happening, and there is Buddha Maitreya in person. And he doesn't say, oh, finally I've seen Maitreya. He goes, so why did it take you so long? Why didn't I see you before? Not impressed. I mean, wouldn't you be bowled over? Maitreya Buddha, whoa. Anyway, yeah, wow, finally, thank you. And so Maitreya says, well, actually, if you look at my robes, this, see all those marks there? That's where I was in the cave with you the whole time. And that's where you would turn around and spit. And it's on my robes, like you'd spat at the wall of the cave, but it was actually my robes. So I was there the whole time. So the idea that Asanga, by that arising, that pure compassion for the dog and the maggots, it was that generated the possibility for him to see Maitreya directly. So then Maitreya, then subsequently, I mean, there's more to the story. Every time I hear it, it's more and more elaborate. It's quite fascinating. But anyway, Maitreya, Asanga took a little bit of convincing, but eventually. And so I think one of the parts was he wasn't still convinced, and so Maitreya goes, "Okay, you pick up this dog, the dog, and put it over your shoulder and go down to the village and see if anyone sees the dog." And there was one woman who saw one leg. It's like, okay, not a real dog. It was an emanation of Maitreya. So you could say she had partial pure view. So then Maitreya takes Arya Asanga to Shida Heaven, to Ganden. This is where we do the practice of Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So there, where Lama Tsongkhapa abides. Maitreya Buddha abides. It's the pure land of the one lifetime bodhisattva, so that we say that in the next life they'll become enlightened. And so they've only got one more lifetime. So he took him there and gave him the transmission of all the bodhicitta teachings. And so this is why this is attributed. And so one of the parts of that teaching is this one, how to generate bodhicitta, this 6 causes and 1 result. So first of all, it says to so this is based on having cultivated, like last week we did a meditation on equanimity. So having cultivated, we won't necessarily say we're there yet, but the first step is for this, and the other method, which we'll look at next week, is is equanimity, this even regard for all beings, as much as we can. And then the actual 6 causes and 1 result. The first step is recognizing that all sentient beings have been my mother. And we use logical reasoning for that. The logical reasoning is based on an acceptance of that we have past and future lives. So why do we accept that we have past and future lives? Because we have a continuity of mental consciousness. So this moment of mental consciousness is based on the previous moment. So we all do also meditations on that. As the Buddha said, how far back do you cognize? When I was in New Zealand, when I got ordained, there was I think the monk was the translator. Anyway, the monk who was living there, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, announced in the teaching that he remembered, this monk remembered his immediate past life. Lama Zopa could check up on it, that it was valid. He didn't say it was an Egyptian princess or whatever else people say. I mean, you could posit that at one point you may well have been an Egyptian princess. You might have been the asp that killed Cleopatra. Just think. Anyway, we could have been anything, and we can speculate, but we don't really know. But what we do know is we have memories, isn't it? So we have memories, at least we have memories of this life, but why do we have those memories? Where are those memories? They're on this mental continuum going back and back and back and back and back. And the Buddha would also say we have karmic imprints on that mental continuum, which is how we come into this life in the first place. And so each of those karmic moments leaves a potentiality on our mental continuum. But if we trace back, even some people may be able to trace back to their time with their birth. I don't know. My mother told me one time she had a conversation with her brother. Her brother was quite a few years younger than her. And he asked her, this was as an adult, he said, I had this memory and the people were all wearing black. I was in my mother's arms and they were all fighting with each other. And so my mother, because she was that much older, had been there and said, oh, that was when so-and-so died and it was the funeral and the family were bickering over the who was going to inherit what. So and she said, you were 6 months old. So he had this memory. She could validate it. It wasn't something made up. She could validate. So that was when he was 6 months old. Pretty impressive, isn't it? So it just goes to show that, babies pick up things from a very, very early age. So, okay, he could remember one incident from when he was 6 months old, and then you go, can you remember before all that? So this is a mark of a Buddha. When the Buddha became enlightened, said in the first quarter of the night, he remembered all his own past lives. All his own past lives. It's like, come and join us if you like. These children are coming for Tibetan class. They've just had their Tibetan. Wonderful. So, for example, the Dalai Lama, one time his teacher, he was teaching, for at Deer Park in America. So where Geshe Sopa Rinpoche was. Geshe Sopa Rinpoche wrote a commentary on the Lam Rim. It's those 5 volumes, maroon and yellow. I say that our bookshop person's nodding. Yes, I know those ones. There's 5 volumes, right? So anyway, so His Holiness was teaching there this one time when he was saying, as these great holy beings do, who, I don't have any realizations, etc., being very humble. And one student sort of despairingly said, but Your Holiness, if you don't have realizations, what hope is there for the rest of us? And so His Holiness said, I do remember a time. I remember memory when I was with Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, he remembers a lifetime 2,600 years ago. So that validated that. So he did that out of compassion for the students who just quite validly despairing that, what hope is there for me? If you've been doing it all these lifetimes and you haven't gained realizations, what about us? So, of course, there are many things these days that, many, what do we call it? Tests done and His Holiness these days is very, very keen that particularly those lamas who do have control over life and death and can determine their next rebirth, that they're studied at death time, their brains or their bodies are studied, to be able to validate this from a scientific point of view, because this is what we want to have, the scientific validation in this world. And so we posit that I must have had, if I had beginningless lives, which is what the Buddha said, because if we trace back our mental, our mind can only come from a previous moment of mind. So there was no original moment of mind, which is pretty freaky. There was no beginning. When I first heard no beginning, it was just like, but there's a beginning to everything. This is what we've all grown up with, isn't it? It began there. It began there. Even, saying the Big Bang, the whole world system came from that. Yes, but before that Big Bang, there were many others and many other world systems. And now they're discovering many other coexistent world systems, which is also what the Buddha talked about. Oh, amazing. So, this whole Buddhist thing starts to blow your mind, doesn't it? Blows my mind just a little bit. Thank you. So if I had these continuity of lifetimes, and we're talking eons here, then this point of recognizing that, well, in all of those lifetimes, I had to have a mother because I had to be born in whatever shape, form, whatever. So therefore, if that's beginningless lives, I've had beginningless mothers, huge number. So we recognize all sentient beings have been our mother. We think about the mother of this life has been our mother, in previous lives, but might have also been father, siblings, might have also been our mortal enemy, may have, whatever. But in all our previous lives, whether we had a chicken mummy, an ant mummy, or whatever, in each of those lives. So on that basis, if we think about our existence, it's thanks to each and every sentient being. So we can only do that by recognizing all sentient beings as one. There's another way to do it as well. Arya Nagarjuna said, if we divide this earth into pieces the size of juniper berries, little bits, the number of these would not be as great as the number of times that each sentient being has been our mother, not just once, but multiple times. So we use this reasoning of the beginningless continuity of mind as one way of saying, well, my previous lives are numberless, my previous mothers are numberless. And due to our individual karma, it's not like the mother of this life has been my mother in each and every one of those previous lives. It depends on our karma. It might have been our mother of this life was an elephant, and at that time I was an ant, so she wasn't my mum. So yeah. But we could also say the mother of this human life has also been my human mother many times. And no matter when I was a turkey, a chicken, and whatever. And that means that I have not always been born human. In fact, when we look at the precious human rebirth, those teachings that say how rare it is to have this human existence, and that's why we call it so precious, to have these conditions, has been, we've worked very hard. We work very hard making stainless prayers to again be born human, to engage with the teachings, to further on the spiritual path and so forth. We've also been made us, practice generosity, and in those past lives, practice huge amounts of virtue, because it requires that to be born human. We talk about an accumulation of merit to be born again human. Stainless prayers, accumulation of virtue, and practice of generosity. So we've lived very ethical life as human beings in the past and have taken the vows that we may have taken in this life or intending to take in this life. We've taken many, many times. So we've been very good people in our past lives. We might say we're not perfect. Nonetheless, we are, all of us here, very good people, just massive amounts of merit. And I've done that before. But I've also been born in every realm of existence, because if I've had beginningless past lives, I've been there, done that. And I find that a way of cultivating compassion for other beings, because it's like, I've been there. I've done everything that the ones I might want to criticize are doing now. I've done that. Right? I haven't always been good, or I haven't always been human to have that moral compass. What happens if I was born a whale and gobbled up all these gazillions of fish for breakfast? That's a killing machine. We talk in this world about killing of humans, but actually the killing of, the immeasurable numbers of beings in the ocean happening on a moment-by-moment basis is enormous. So I've done that. I've been a mass murderer, right? Because we don't want to think about ourselves as a mass murderer, but just saying. So we've done it all. So we could say that even hell beings have mothers. From a Buddhist perspective, even like you're born in the hell realms, but you don't just spontaneously be born there. You have a mum in the hell realm. I have no idea if there's absolutely any capacity for love and compassion in the hell realm, because you're suffering so much. You know, we think about our sufferings, nothing like the sufferings in the hell realms.
I thought you did just manifest it.
What was that?
I thought you did just manifest.
You just popped into it. You had to have a mum. Just think about it.
Because I thought the suffering had
Of course, in a Christian point of view, you just manifest there.
Oh.
You manifest in hell, but then it's permanent. It goes on forever. You're in hell forever. There's no way out. At least we get a way out. Okay. You create the cause to be born in the hell realm, but it's not like go to hell, you know, do not pass go, whatever it is. Is that right? Or does that go to jail? Let's go to jail.
Go directly to jail.
Do not pass go. Yeah. I have to say, the people who are in jail that I have met, quite a few, the worst thing that you can do, well, there's a couple of really bad things you can do to end up in jail, but one of them is killing your mother. That's like, because they all love their mum. Mostly. You know, one of our guys who was in, when I say our guys, who was engaged with the prison project and actually just finished discovering Buddhism in prison. Wow. Not easy to do, including all the practices. Well, the Nyumne was one Nyumne, but I didn't think it was possible, but it was. In any case, he was, not that we asked them, but we talked about it. He was in prison for killing his mother. I don't know the circumstances of that. But I do know that he then subsequently, while he was in prison, he wanted to ordain. Now, many of them in prison want to ordain because you're basically leading a celibate life and you're living as a monk if you engage with the Dharma, which he did. Basically, he was living like that. He didn't take all the vows because you can't while you're in prison. But in any case, I mean, of course, when he got out of prison, he no longer wanted to be a monk. And that happens too. I mean, some do. Some have ordained who were in prison, but the vast majority not. But because he wanted to ordain and express that, we had to say, because one of the things that prevents you ordaining is having committed any of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, which is the directly go to hell in your next life. And one of them is killing your mother or your father, killing an aha, drawing blood from a Buddha and with malicious intent, and causing a split amongst the Sangha. Is why we don't criticize any other Buddhist tradition or anything, because the Buddha taught all of that, as long as it's an authentic tradition. The Buddha taught it all for the benefit of the world and all the beings within it. So, so that was an interesting conversation, whether it was possible that he would be able to ordain. And I was sort of disappointed that he, when he got out of prison, no longer wanted to ordain, because I sort of wanted to hear what Lama Zopa Rinpoche said. Like, is it possible that you could actually purify enough that negative karma to have the conditions? But maybe the fact that he didn't want to meant he didn't have the merit for that. But he's still a Dharma practitioner, volunteers at the Dharma Center, still, you know, doing all of that. Amazing. Okay. So recognizing all sentient beings have been our mothers. And the next one is probably one of the ones that some people have difficulty with, remembering the kindness of the mother. So we use the example of the mother of this life, how kind our mother of this life has been. And this is where if people have a difficult relationship with their mother of this life, or not a relationship with their mother of this life, then it can be difficult to come to this point. But on the very basis, if nothing else, she gave you this life. Of course, both your parents were involved, but so were you. Your mind's up in there. So, of course, you know, when I was having a difficult time, when I was being a difficult teenager, and I said to my mother, I didn't ask to be born. She said, well, I didn't ask to have you. And I had to realize she was actually right, I was wrong. Because she was a good Catholic mum. She didn't ask to have me. You know what I mean? It was sort of Catholic way. I'm one of 6 kids. But when I met the Buddha's teaching, I realized I did actually ask to be born. In my mental consciousness, I did ask for her to be my mum. It zapped right in there. So I had to sort of revise my understanding. So at the very minimum, she gave you the capacity to have everything that you have right now, the very minimum. And even, you know, we reflect on what she went through in those 8, 9, however many months of pregnancy, that, you know, she had to be careful about her diet. Maybe, I mean, generally you have to be careful about your diet. She had to carry this weight around that got bigger and bigger. And all the discomfort that comes with that. Maybe she had to give up smoking or drinking or whatever conditions, and then deal with the pain of childbirth. Now, I'm not a mum. I have not experienced the pain of childbirth, but I expect that some of you have. My sister-in-law, one sister-in-law, when she got married, she said she wanted to have 10 kids. After she had 1, she revised that. She definitely revised. Anyway, she has 4, but the last 2 were twins. So 3 pregnancies was quite a, yeah. You know, and so we reflect on all the ways in which our mother has been kind to us by, you know, yeah, using that as the example that we then extrapolate out to all sentient beings. So one of the things that's said is that she gave me my eyes to see the most beautiful objects, my ears to hear the most beautiful sounds, my nose to smell the sweetest perfumes. Now, I have a friend, I'm sure she's not alone in the world, that does not have a sense of smell. So I don't know if that's hereditary from the parents or not, but anyway, she wouldn't be able to claim that one. She doesn't have a sense of smell. And I remember, because I remember the first time bringing her flowers, she was so disinterested. And I thought, how much is our delight in flowers associated with smell? I mean, there's a lot of flowers that don't have any smell, isn't there? But it didn't have that relevance, which was, I found very interesting, because usually when we're talking about the offerings on the altar and we talk about offering flowers, it's talking about offering, you know, beauty for the eyes. But for her, it wasn't beauty to the eyes. They were all different. My tongue to enjoy the most delicious tastes. I think we all subscribe to that one. Or my body to enjoy sensual pleasures. It says, and have many children. Well, I passed up that opportunity. Thank you very much. Not interested. Maybe some people are. But, you know, I mean, I would say the vast majority of people in this world want to become parents. Although I heard in China, you know, the population's going down. They have to give incentives or something because they encourage people to have kids. And I don't think it's just in China, is it? It's becoming a thing in the world. Anyway, you know, you can still, through having the body, the tactility, experience a lot of sensual pleasures, nice, soft, everything. So also, you know, we could say that every success that we have experienced, that, you know, whatever we've gained on the basis of having this body, speech, mind, you know, being creative, being, our jobs, our study, everything depends on that mother's kindness. Not necessarily throughout our whole lives, although I have to say for myself, I had a very wonderful, close relationship with my own mother, and I feel very grateful to have had her as my mother. It was a good choice. Just saying. Of course, I had absolutely no control over the life and death, but just sort of, phew, at least I ended up in a good situation. And, my mother wasn't Buddhist. Nobody else in my family is Buddhist. But being born in a family open to whatever makes you happy, basically, a religion or not a religion. Although we were encouraged, I think, to have some spiritual life. I mean, we used to go on Sunday drives and visit whatever church was open. Now they're none of them open, are they? Or often, or maybe they are on Sundays. But anyway, it's not like we rocked up to a town and went to the pub. We rocked up and went to the church. And lunch we brought with us, so we weren't sitting in a cafe. So we contemplate all the various ways of the kindness. And if we contemplate that over a period of time, I know for myself, you can't get to the bottom of the kindness of the mother, like endless. I mentioned I was one of 6 kids. Now, my mother, every time you rocked up at her place, whether you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, you'd be offered something, right? You'd be offered something, and just every single offering, incredible. And then at the end, towards the end of my mother's life, when I was caring for her, and she was like, "I'm so sorry, I'm taking you away from your career." I'm like, "Look, Mum, you are my career right now. I'm a nun. This is what we do." But I would also say to her, and I could quite genuinely say this because I'd reflected on the kindness of the mother, I could never repay the kindness you've shown me in this life. I think all mothers are just amazing. Just amazing. But incredible kindness of them, incredible love, incredible compassion, care. I had a friend of mine who, when he moved back home to his mother's place, when he was 42, like in between whatever situation, whatever crisis was going on, I thought, a mother's job never ends, does it? Kids had all left home. "Hi, Mum, I'm moving back in." "Yeah, come on down." Incredible. Anyway, I just rejoice. So I think we can all rejoice in the kindness of our precious mothers. It's not even Mother's Day. Every day is a Mother's Day, isn't it? We rejoice in the kindness of our mothers. Okay, so we'll leave it here for now. Sorry, were there any questions or comments before I go? Yes. Yes, continue.
Remember,
Yeah.
because I have memories from when I was a baby.
Yes.
And all my life, people have told me that it's not like you and that makes stuff. I'm so vivid and so strong.
Yeah.
I'm so elaborate about
Have made it up.
Right.
Is there anyone in your family that can validate that for you? Who was there at the time? No.
Yeah, the fact that I was there and not place.
Yeah.
Yes, but not the experience.
No, they can't. But they can validate you were there. They can probably validate that you were, in fact, drinking milk.
They usually say
you can't have that. Yeah. Well, there are things that and this is where there can be things in our memory that we're not sure is our direct experience or not, but they saw you there, you were drinking milk, and then your experience of that is your experience. They can't validate that, but you can say it's valid.
It's so strong. It's like sitting in a high chair and giving you milk bottle to drink.
Yeah.
And they didn't have my favorite tea. Thank you again. had to be like a certain flow.
Yeah.
I kept spitting it out because I was really fast, really slow. And I kept spitting it out because it wasn't right. Now, how can you validate that? Well, really, I didn't want to kind of talk about this in too much detail. I just wanted to know how I can cooperate.
Well, that's your valid experience. So that's a memory that you have that you just say, oh, I had that memory. How old were you? Do you know? Yeah, you don't know. But yeah, that seems a valid experience. And this is where, you know, we can have belief systems or belief systems around it saying that's not possible. And your experience tells you it is. So that is valid. Because they can say, yes, you were there. Yes, you were sitting in a high chair. Yes, you were having milk. Yes, you spat out the dummy.
I use that in meditation practice, and I try to meditate on continuity, try to
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not needing to relive situations. It's not about that, but realizing, I have a memory from very young age of this life. No, not necessarily. Just the people you're talking to. Why not? Your experience is your experience. It's valid. Didn't Forrest Gump remember his being in the womb? Was that Forrest Gump? World according to Car. There was one where there's all this experience going on in the, I mean, it was a film. A whole lot of experiences going on in the womb. Why not? You know? And you can say, like, if that monk in New Zealand could remember his past life, Shakyamuni Buddha could remember all of his holiness could remember being, and the only way you could remember is having continuity of consciousness. And you go, oh, well, I've got experience of that. It's valid. Okay, we're dedicating now. So page 8, the first 2 verses. So dedicating all the virtuous merit that we've accumulated in this time together, which is unimaginable to ourselves, but we can just say we have, to consolidate that in our mind so it continues to grow and grow, realizations, continuity of consciousness, kindness of our mother sentient beings, our connection with each and every one. Gopa Shujanchub Sencho Rinpoche Make Panamge Kuchi Ye Panyam Pame Payam Gone Gondu Kawashu. And the next page, 9, a prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I'll just mention, I think people know, I was at the commemorative service for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, 1 year, all the commemorative pujas at Kopan Monastery. It was just so inspiring. See so many high lamas, abbots of the big monasteries and so forth there. Ganjin Tripa, the holder of the Ganjin tradition from Lama Tsongkhapa, the head of the Gelugpa school, and many reincarnate beings there. Incredible. Just to be inspired by the fact of the high regard they hold Lama Zopa Rinpoche and how many, like, it's unfathomable how many beings Lama Zopa connected with. Incredible. You had no idea they have connection, and it's, oh, when I was a young kid, he did this for me and that for me. Amazing. Anyway, swift return. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shuravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands. Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the oceans of the three jewels and the great waves of Bodhichitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And the long life prayer for Tenzin Osel Rinpoche, Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings. Foremost and holy Lama, to you are our supreme. We make this prayer of supplication. Lama, please, please live long. See you, Manny.